Harry being taken to the hospital under suspicious circumstances, and they are saying it could be because of an overdose.
Prince Harry has just been rushed to the hospital in critical condition following an incident involving a drug overdose. But what shocked the public even more was Meghan Markle's swift move to prove she wasn't at the scene by releasing a video showing herself at a private members-only club on the very night of the incident. Even more astonishing is the complete silence from the palace, as if none of it ever happened. As the media collectively asked, what really happened, the British royal family remained utterly tight-lipped. King Charles and Prince William issued no statements whatsoever. Meghan seemingly vanished from the media spotlight. Yet behind the scenes, rumors have been spreading rapidly through newsroom corridors. This isn't the first time Harry has faced a crisis, but it may be the first time he's truly crossed the point of no return. What pushed the rebellious prince to the brink between life and death? Was it an accident or a drug-induced breakdown? And why has a grave incident that nearly cost a royal his life been so meticulously concealed as if it were a matter of national security? One, the prince found unconscious and rushed to the hospital. In the early morning hours of Monday at exactly 4:12 a.m., the serene town of Montecito, California, known as a paradise for the elite and a vault for untold secrets, was abruptly shaken by the blare of an ambulance siren piercing through the thick fog. In a neighborhood lined with sprawling mansions, hidden behind encrypted iron gates and manicured laurel hedges, an emergency had just unfolded so severe and dramatic that even Hollywood screenwriters would struggle to dream it up. According to a night shift security guard on duty, Prince Harry was found unconscious, collapsed across the cold marble floor of the living room. No reflexes, no awareness. His breathing was faint, barely holding on. His skin had turned ghostly pale. His lips began to tint purple, classic signs of acute oxygen deprivation. The heart that once blazed in fiery interviews, explosive documentaries, and seething resentment toward the royal family now beat irregularly like the dying flicker of a light bulb moments before it goes dark. The rapid response team from the Santa Barbara Medical Station arrived in less than 6 minutes. They had no idea who they were about to treat until they identified the patient. It's Prince Harry, and he's in critical condition. Upon entering the living room, the paramedics were met with a scene that chilled them to the bone straight out of a tabloid headline made real. A small, unlabeled glass vial with its cap popped off lay discarded on the oak coffee table. Inside, a fine grayish-blue powder, possibly residue from psychedelic mushrooms or an intense synthetic stimulant. Nearby, a steaming cup of tea and an open weathered book on ancient Peruvian spiritual rituals resting precisely at the page, introducing the gateway to soul connection. Emergency vitals were immediately checked on site. His blood pressure had plunged, and his oxygen saturation was at a dangerous low. A direct injection of adrenaline was administered while another team member inserted a breathing tube. The lead medic contacted the nation's top poison control center. In an instant, the lavish estate had been transformed into a makeshift trauma center in the heart of the ultra-wealthy. He was loaded onto a stretcher, his limbs stabilized and strapped-down heart monitors attached and swiftly wheeled toward the ambulance. One hand dangled limp off the edge, icy cold, still dusted with fine white particles, remnants of what had clearly been a long, chaotic night. As the ambulance doors slammed shut, the name Harry flashed across the emergency command screen not as a royal icon, not as a tabloid spectacle, but as a man suspended between life and death. Prince Harry's name has long been associated with drugs. He himself was forthright in his memoir. Spare admitting to using cocaine at 17, smoking marijuana at Eton, drinking to the point of vomiting as a teen, and even taking magic mushrooms that made him laugh hysterically when the toilet began to morph shapes. He also experimented with ayahuasca, an intense hallucinogen from the Amazon rainforest, hoping to spiritually connect with his mother. Yet behind these surreal journeys was a wound that never healed. The death of Princess Diana carved a deep scar into the soul of 12-year-old Harry, a boy thrown into the eye of a global media storm with no time to grieve, to cry, or even to understand what had happened. He later admitted to suffering from panic disorder, depression, and a pervasive fear so paralyzing that he couldn't bring himself to leave his home. To keep functioning, he had to medicate himself just to push emotions down. But eventually, drugs offered what he described as a faster and stronger solution. In a candid conversation with renowned trauma therapist, Dr. Gabor Mate Hari was identified as exhibiting signs of ADHD. He confessed, "I was crushed by the past," and said psychedelics made him feel as if he was healing. But the question remains, was it truly therapy or a costly disguise for a soul in freefall? More concerning still, this wasn't the first time. Close insiders had previously warned that Harry was spiraling into a dangerous loop between self-healing and self-destruction. A prince once fearless on the battlefields of Afghanistan, now brought to his knees in the supposed safety of his own home by a silent war raging within his mind. He had longed for freedom, a break from the gilded cage of royalty, but perhaps never realized he was building a new cage of his own, one made of white smoke, dried fungi, and illusions with no exit. 2. The wife's unusual absence. And yet throughout that entire ordeal, Meghan was nowhere to be seen. No sign of a loved one, no one calling his name, not even the faintest sound of weeping piercing the stillness of the night. Only the ambulance siren echoed in long slicing wails, shattering the quiet and carrying the rebellious prince away from the very home he had tried to build, straight toward the critical edge between life and death, the emergency room. Meghan Markle wasn't just absent when the crisis struck. She was reportedly away attending a private event at an elite members-only club, at the very moment her husband lay in critical condition, being rushed to the hospital. A bartender from the exclusive club later recalled that Meghan arrived wearing a glittering black dress, elegant and radiant like a star about to walk the red carpet. She sat beside a documentary filmmaker known for his work with Netflix and a high-profile female CEO from the fashion industry. They clinked glasses, laughed animatedly, and throughout the evening, Meghan showed no visible signs of concern about the medical emergency involving the man the entire world was focused on. When a security staff member from the Montecito estate called her in urgency, a waiter revealed that Meghan discreetly motioned to silence the phone, then resumed her conversation without hesitation. What raised further eyebrows was what followed. Just a few hours later, she exited the club through the back door, avoiding all cameras and reporters, and swiftly uploaded an old photo to Instagram, showing herself in a moment of leisure, as if to silently construct an alibi. Within Hollywood's media circles, whispers began to stir. Could Meghan have already prepared a post-crisis strategy? One former associate of the couple shared, "She's always feared the worst happening to Harry, but not out of love, out of fear of being dragged down with him. Meghan always plans her exits." That obsession, insiders believe, explains why she consistently maintained a measured distance whenever Harry entered a fragile psychological state. The solo trips, the private parties, the contracts signed without his name. If he collapses, she has to ensure she doesn't go down with him, a former friend observed coldly. Tragically, the woman Harry once called his light in the darkness vanished precisely during the darkest hour of his life. Sharp-tongued commentators pointed out Meghan's absence wasn't coincidence. She left at the right moment in the right way to build a legal shield for whatever might come. If Harry doesn't survive, or if the lasting consequences of this incident are irreversible, will Meghan emerge as the grieving widow, or the woman who quietly secured her exit plan in advance? In Hollywood, it's called a contingency plan. In the royal family, perhaps they would call it something else entirely, a betrayal wrapped in silence. Just picture it. A man lies unconscious, locked in a struggle between life and death, while the woman who is supposed to be by his side laughs beneath the soft lights of a luxury club. In the most suffocating hours, the people expected to stand by him were nowhere to be found. Meghan, instead of keeping vigil at the hospital, allegedly left in haste to craft a convenient narrative for herself. And this is no longer speculation. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing her at the private club that night, radiant, laughing as though nothing serious was unfolding outside. 3. Troubling signs from the past. The night Prince Harry collapsed in the Montecito mansion cannot simply be labeled a one-off accident. It was the final alarm bell on a silent downward spiral, the wound that never healed, still quietly bleeding for more than 2 decades. It all began in the early 2000s when Harry had just entered his teenage years. Back then, the public saw a red-headed boy smiling in a boarding school uniform, but behind the fortified stone walls of Highgrove, whispered concerns had already begun to creep in. Royal staff recalled beer cans hidden under the bed, dried cannabis found in coat pockets, and nighttime escapades that ended with Harry returning home with bloodshot eyes, disheveled hair, and rumpled clothes. One winter night in 2001, at just 16 years old, Harry was found unconscious in the stables reeking of cheap vodka. It took 2 security officers over 2 hours to get him back to his room without raising suspicion. It was around that time that Prince Charles began to realize the seriousness of the issue. But instead of seeking help from addiction or mental health professionals, he opted to send Harry to a youth rehab center for a few days, not for real treatment, but to ease public backlash and handle a looming media crisis. The palace knew, the staff knew, and everyone agreed to stay silent because the royal reputation mattered more than the truth. In 2005, Harry became the target of fierce criticism when he wore a Nazi costume to a themed party. But beyond that moral scandal lay a darker detail the press never touched. That very night, he was reportedly under the influence of ketamine, a powerful anesthetic often abused for its hallucinogenic effects. A medical team member who accompanied him noted his pupils were abnormally dilated, his blood pressure spiked, and he was virtually incapable of distinguishing reality. Yet again, the palace issued a brief apology and quickly smothered any further inquiry into the events of that evening. The downward spiral continued quietly but relentlessly. In 2007, rumors swirled that Harry had snorted vodka through his nose during a party in Ibiza, an act so dangerous that even his accompanying bodyguards were in disbelief. One former guard who later retired told an Australian paper, "He laughed hysterically while doing it like he was mocking something sacred. I've seen a lot, but never a prince punishing himself like that." Doctors warned that introducing alcohol directly through the nasal cavity could cause severe brain damage or even death. But as usual, the media remained silent. When News of the World, one of the few outlets with detailed records of the incident, prepared to publish the story, it was abruptly shut down amid the phone hacking scandal, and all evidence disappeared with it. To prevent Harry from partying too wildly in public nightclubs, Prince Charles came up with an unusual solution. He had a private club built within the Highgrove estate, complete with a DJ booth, laser lights, and soundproofed rooms where Harry could blow off steam in a controlled space. But the effort to contain the chaos backfired spectacularly. Rather than a safe zone, it turned into a fortress of excess where Harry and his friends partied without limits. Some nights he drank until he passed out in the bathroom, vomited blood, and had to be dragged out by a housekeeper using a blanket, all while the press continued to paint him as a valiant Marine prince. By 2010, the psychological cracks became more apparent. A leaked, classified report later revealed that Harry frequently dreamt of Princess Diana crying and calling his name. Once he even claimed to have seen her sitting in a corner of his room, a textbook case of visual hallucination. Doctors suspected he was abusing LSD or other powerful psychedelics, but Harry refused to answer any questions about substance use, and once again the palace remained silent. When Meghan Markle entered Harry's life, many hoped she would be his saving grace, but love alone couldn't rescue a soul fractured so deeply by neglect. Harry continued to seek spiritual healing through trips to Peru using ayahuasca and other hallucinogens to connect with his deepest self. Sources say he once lost consciousness during an ayahuasca ceremony and needed oxygen for nearly 20 minutes to recover, but this information was kept tightly sealed as it did not align with his public image. So when Harry was found unconscious in his Montecito mansion, lips turning blue, heart in chaos, an unmarked glass vial on the table, and a spiritual book left open beside a steaming cup of tea. The pieces of the past all came rushing back. This was not his first fall. It was the cumulative result of hundreds of stumbles that no one ever acknowledged. It was the quiet scream for help that had echoed for 20 years from a prince trapped in a gilded cage he never chose. And this time, he had come dangerously close to the edge, just one step further, and the world may have already been saying goodbye. 4. Meghan's arrival and the subtle seizure of control. While the world was still fiercely debating soft power and the cracks forming within the British monarchy, another wave of information, darker, more chilling, was quietly spreading. It was the theory that Meghan Markle wasn't just Prince Harry's partner, but the very person who pulled him deeper into addiction, transforming a once defiant yet sharp prince into a ghost-like figure, detached, vulnerable, and easily manipulated. This suspicion didn't stem merely from Harry's gaunt public appearances or the vacant look in his eyes during interviews, but from accounts leaked by those who had lived within their orbit, former staff, longtime friends, and people who had attended secret parties behind the glittering facade. According to these sources, Meghan was fully aware of her husband's fragile mental state. Some even claimed that she encouraged, or at the very least facilitated, his access to stimulants as a subtle form of control. This was no light accusation. But it wasn't entirely baseless either. Before donning a royal wedding dress, Meghan was widely known in Hollywood's party circles, not for breakthrough acting. Her most notable role was a supporting lawyer on the TV show Suits, but for her frequent presence at exclusive smoke-filled decadent parties, where little was said aloud and much was left unspoken. The pinnacle of this reputation came during Meghan's first wedding in Jamaica, an event remembered not for the blessings exchanged but for the infamous wedding favor bags. Some guests recalled that each person left the party with a small pouch not filled with candy or souvenirs, but with pre-rolled joints. What might have seemed cool or fun at the time carried enormous risk, especially when some attendees unwittingly brought those bags back into the United States, where transporting narcotics across borders is strictly illegal. From there, a larger question began to take shape. Was Meghan truly unfamiliar with the world of drugs? Or had that lifestyle long been second nature, something she later brought into her marriage with Harry? Especially given Harry's own public admissions of using ayahuasca magic mushrooms and cannabis to heal from his mother's death. The idea that Meghan didn't just fail to stop him, but may have aided his descent, suddenly felt more disturbing than ever. But Meghan didn't stop at influencing Harry's habits. She gradually took hold of every major decision in his life, including the bombshell 2020 announcement, stepping away from the British royal family. A man born to inherit a throne chose to relinquish power, heritage, and title. Many blamed the media. Others pointed to royal pressures. But the deeper one dug, the clearer it became. The strongest presence behind that break was Meghan Markle. From her earliest days within the royal circle, Meghan carved out a space where everything revolved around her. Insiders say she didn't adapt, she took over. Long-held traditions were questioned, rules dismissed as outdated, and anyone who resisted was labeled racist. While the royal family scrambled to respond, Meghan had already cast herself as the victim and forced Harry to choose her side lest he be seen as a weak husband unable to defend his wife. Bit by bit, Meghan severed Harry's final ties with his family. Calls became infrequent. Visits were delayed or canceled. Those who disagreed with her, from Prince William to King Charles to Harry's closest friends, were all pushed aside. She skillfully planted in Harry's mind the belief, they don't love you, they just want to control you. And as Harry's world grew smaller, Meghan became his only anchor. Then came the masterstroke, convincing Harry to leave the UK under a plan dubbed Megxit. She painted a picture of freedom in California, a life without protocol, without invasive media, filled with sunshine, ease, and personal voice. But what happened instead, freed from the royal family, Meghan swiftly repackaged Harry as a media product. Netflix, Spotify, the memoir, Spare, all built around the fractures between him and his family to launch the Sussex empire she controlled. One of Meghan's most sophisticated tactics was her ability to flip roles. In the public eye, she wasn't a dominant wife pulling the strings, but a fragile woman bullied by the monarchy. Harry, meanwhile, was the knight in shining armor, a man brave enough to defy an outdated system for love. But it was all a perfectly crafted performance, scripted, directed, and starring Meghan herself. Even more concerning was how she stripped Harry of his true self. Once a soldier who served in Afghanistan, a passionate advocate for veterans and charities, he was now known only as Meghan's husband, the man who recounted emotional breakdowns on American television. His former image of strength and independence had all but vanished. He was no longer a prince, but a supporting character in a reality series produced by Meghan. Even in private life, those who worked with them say Meghan controlled nearly everything from where they lived to their schedules to how their children were raised. She built an invisible fence around their lives, ostensibly to protect their image, but in reality to control every access point, who could come in, who was excluded, what could be said, and what had to remain silent. Harry, once a man with a strong sense of self, now existed as a compliant shadow. And her control didn't come from rage or violence, but from conditional affection. Meghan made Harry feel chosen, loved, and heard as long as he followed the script. Whenever he tried to reconnect with his family, it ended in arguments, tears, silence, and emotional withdrawal. Over time, Harry learned to avoid conflict by cutting off anything Meghan couldn't control. Many sources say that since moving to the U.S., Meghan has tightened her grip. Every interview, every public appearance must pass through her filter. Meanwhile, Harry, now visibly thinner with a distant gaze, no longer resembled the brave man who left a kingdom for love. He looked more like a puppet trapped in a world constructed by a cunning, sharp, and calculating wife. And if the rumors are true, the substances may have become the soft shackles that kept Harry subdued, pliable, and easily led. This wasn't merely a personal tragedy anymore. It was a form of psychological abuse, a subtle form of violence cloaked in the language of love and healing. But the story didn't stop there. Meghan's mother, Doria, was also drawn into the growing web of suspicion. Some California locals claimed she had past ties to the underground world and that she still maintained shady connections. There was no concrete evidence, but whispers behind closed doors spread rapidly. The Markle family not only knew where to find what they needed, they knew how to make everyone stay silent. When all these fragments are pieced together, the theory that Meghan controls Harry mentally and in life no longer sounds outlandish, not just enabling his addiction, but turning it into an invisible leash. But perhaps the most frightening part isn't Meghan herself, it's the number of people who knew and chose to stay silent for all these years. 5. The Palace, where truth is buried beneath velvet and gold. From drunken parties and nude photos in Las Vegas to reckless public outbursts, any one of those scandals would have been enough to destroy a career if it were anyone else. But Harry was different. He always walked away untouched, and that had nothing to do with luck or divine protection, but everything to do with the massive media apparatus that sprang into action the moment anything threatened the image. Buckingham Palace, the symbol of power and tradition, was in reality a masterful PR fortress capable of steering public opinion faster than any tabloid. Every time damaging information about Harry threatened to leak, the machinery moved swiftly. Journalists were persuaded, articles disappeared overnight, and by morning, headlines were filled with photos of a smiling prince comforting cancer patients or standing tall in desert fatigues. Even when rumors emerged that Harry began using drugs at the age of 17, the palace admitted only the bare minimum, then redirected the narrative through a highly calculated media campaign. Harry was sent to a rehab center, but only for a single day. The press lauded him as the brave prince facing his demons. Within 3 days, all of Britain was applauding the rebirth of a national hero. The scandal vanished as though it had never happened. What's more disturbing is that this protection didn't come from compassion. It came from fear. The monarchy understood all too well if someone as high-ranking as Harry VI in line to the throne were publicly exposed as a drug addict spiraling out of control, the entire institution could falter. So even though they knew everything, they chose to bury the truth under layers of silence and silk. And this shielding went beyond simple cover-ups. According to multiple palace insiders, there was an entire team tasked with one mission to monitor and manage every image fracture involving Harry. When he lost his temper in a nightclub, the media team quietly paid off the venue to erase the security footage. When he was seen high at a private party, a new charity initiative was instantly launched. Mistake after mistake was erased with a fresh set of inspiring photos and sugar-coated headlines. Throughout those years, Harry was never truly held accountable. On the contrary, he was often rewarded for keeping quiet. That blanket of protection didn't help him recover it, led him further into confusion and detachment. He learned that as long as he stayed silent and let the palace handle it, no consequence would ever touch him. So he kept falling quietly, invisibly. The mainstream media wasn't innocent either. Many national outlets willingly looked the other way, not out of respect, but because of mutually beneficial relationships. When the palace released a heartwarming photo of Prince William taking his children to school, or the Queen smiling in a garden, the press also agreed to forget the image of Harry screaming in a drunken rage. It was all part of a negotiation, and in that game, the truth was always the first casualty. Even after Harry officially stepped back from royal duties, the effort to preserve his image didn't stop. Though no longer the palace's formal responsibility, they continued to push the narrative of a lost son rather than a fallen figure. Because if the full extent of his drug use hallucinations and emotional breakdowns were exposed, the moral foundation that the monarchy had spent centuries building could collapse overnight. The tragedy is this, that protection never saved Harry. It pulled him further from himself. When someone is never made to face the consequences of their actions, they are never truly given the chance to change. And that is the deeper tragedy, not that Harry fell into addiction, but that he was taught every mistake could be erased so long as he remained a prince. Now looking at the present, what do we see? A man sinking further into dependency, surrounded by people who know the truth but pretend not to see it. No one speaks up, no one reaches out, and with every passing day, Harry drifts deeper into the darkness, a darkness carefully woven by the very people closest to him. And what about you? What do you think? Behind the cold, curated facade of royalty, is there truly a machine willing to sacrifice the happiness and well-being of its own blood just to keep the sheen of prestige untarnished? If Harry has truly hit rock bottom, who will reach out and pull him back, or will everyone simply turn away and pretend nothing just happened? How many more times must a man collapse before the world finally stops and faces the truth? And is Meghan really the only one who deserves blame, or is she merely one link in a far larger tragedy, sculpted by forces far more powerful than most of us dare to imagine? Thank you for staying with us until the very end of today's video. If you too feel that the shadows behind this royal glow are worth exploring, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming analysis. We'll keep digging deeper, not to condemn, but to peel back the layers of truth long buried by time and power. Because sometimes a single question asked at the right moment can be enough to shake an entire system awake from its glorious, untouchable dream.